Welcome to Data Analytics Professionals, and I'm Shahnaz Malik. And let's quickly jump into today's lecture topic. Now, just to remind all of you that this is a lecture series on AWS and machine learning, and current topic of this lecture is going to be about AWS identity and access management, and that's also named as IAM. Now, this is lecture number 4 in this series, and to begin with, AWS Identity and Access Management is a web service that helps you to set up users and groups and shows you how to protect your AWS resources with access control policies. IAM also shows how to connect to other identity services to grant external users access to your AWS resources. With IAM, you can centrally manage users' security credentials such as access keys and permissions, and that control which AWS resources users and applications can access. When you first create an AWS account, you begin with a single sign-in identity that has complete access to all AWS services and resources in the account. This identity is called the AWS account a root user and is accessed by signing in with the email address and password that you used to create the AWS account. Now, in simple language, AWS Identity and Access Management is a permission system that regulates access to AWS resources. For an AWS administrator, it means who can access and what can be accessed from the AWS. IAM allows you to assign permissions to groups of users, access auditing AWS Cloud Trial, and integrates with other identity tech like Microsoft Active Directory. Now, on your screens at the moment, you can see if there is an AWS Cloud with this boundary. So this is your AWS Cloud, AWS account, and within this AWS Cloud or your account are AWS services. And you can access these services as a user. You can interact with this cloud and access these services through IAM. Now, IAM could be IAM user or IAM group, okay? And we'll see also how these IAM groups are, do have policies attached which could grant permissions or deny permissions to these users which are who are in the group to these services or the resources. Now, IAM works through 4 important key concepts, okay? And those are users, groups, roles, and policies. And policies also sometimes could be termed as, seen as permissions. So if you grab the understanding of these 4 concepts, then you will understand IAM better. Now let's talk about the users. And users are specific individuals who can receive personal login credentials such as username and password to access AWS Management Console on their own. Although they would have limited set of permissions as defined by an AWS administrator. Users also possess secret keys and secret access keys which are used as inputs when setting up clients in application level code. Now, regarding groups are simply a collection of users with a common theme. An example could be like administrators, power users, data analysts, data scientists, developers, data engineers, and so on. These could be the various groups if you are working as an a member, if you are employed in any of the AWS project, then you might see such groups interact with AWS. Now we talked about the IAM user, IAM groups, and now regarding IAM policies. And the IAM policies could be also assigned to IAM role. IAM role is similar to a user, and IAM role doesn't have any long-term defined credentials, passwords, or access keys associated with it. Here the user is assigned to a role and access keys are created dynamically and provided to a user temporarily. IAM roles could be used to delegate access to users, applications, and services that normally don't have access to the AWS resources. Users who assumes the role temporarily gives up his or her own permissions and instead takes permissions of the role to perform the task. Now, in simple language, roles are simply a collection of policies. For example, we could define a role that has both DB read and DB write permissions for a particular DynamoDB table. Roles are not typically connected to individual users and used by anyone who needs it to accomplish certain tasks. Now let's see policies. Okay, policies are simply a low-level permissions or low-level permission to AWS resources. There are basically two types of permissions, and that is allow or deny permissions to resources. Just remember, by default everything is denied. Now this is a simple sample policy of administrator access. Okay, and if you see it has version number attached to it, and then it has this statement is attached, a statement element is there, effect, here it's allow, action, all actions are allowed, and resources to all resources to allow. So this is a policy which generally is a default policy of AWS for administrators group. Now here is another policy just to show you. So sample policy AWS deny all, and this is also a default policy, one of the default policies for inside AWS. When you go into policy section and you see here, it's again the version element is there and statement element, and if you see action element, all, effect, it could be either allow or deny, because it's a policy is deny all, so the effect is deny and to all resources. Okay, and now you have seen just now, let's talk about what's this version, what's this statement here, element, action, effect, and resources, and maybe there are some other elements which are not shown here but might be written in some other policies. But let's discuss some main ones, okay, so that we can understand what's happening here. Now the version policy element specifies the language syntax rules that are to be used to process a policy. To use all of the available policy features, include the following version element before the statement element in all of your policies, and that is this version. Okay, this version then is equivalent to is semicolon is give the string which is 2012 -10 -17. Okay. Now regarding the statement element in the main element for is the main element for the policy. The statement element is the main element for the policy, and this element is required. The statement element can contain a single statement or an array of individual statements. Each individual statement block must be enclosed in curly braces. For multiple statements, the array must be enclosed in square brackets. Okay, so if you see an multiple statement, so if you see, so one statement, two statement, three statement, but they are all enclosed in a square bracket. Okay. Now, regarding the effect element, it is required and specifies whether the statement result is an allow or an explicit deny. Valid values for effect are allow and deny. So for example, you could see effect allow. So this means that the policy is allowing, and what it is allowing, we'll talk about that. By default, access to resources is denied. I have already said it, and this is a repetition, and this is very important to understand. To allow access to AWS resource, you must set the effect element to allow. To override an allow, for example, to override an allow that is otherwise in force, you set the effect element to deny. Now, the action element describes the specific action or actions that will be allowed or denied. The statements must include either an action or not action element. Each AWS service has its own set of actions that describe tasks that you can perform with that service. Let's see an example in the next slide. Now, if you see here, okay, you have this policy, and if you see the version number is given, and then the statement starts, and if you see here is, say this is another element, okay, then here is statement, okay, and it has effect is allow. Action is that on S3 it can create bucket, list all my buckets and get bucket location. Okay, and then resources, if you see, it is AWS, and this belongs to S3 bucket. So this is one of the examples. Now, the resource element specifies the object or objects that the statement covers. Statements must include either a resource or a non-resource element. You specify a resource using an ARN. Each service has its own set of resources. Although you always use an ARN to specify a resource, the details of the ARN for a resource depends on the service and the resource. The following example, which is here, refers to all items within a specific Amazon S3 bucket. Now, you might also see condition element inside your policy, and the condition element the condition element lets you specify conditions for when a policy is in effect. Please note that the condition element is optional. In the condition element, what you need to do is you build expression in which you use condition operators, for example, equals, less than, extra, to match the condition keys and values in the policy against keys and values in the request context. So here is an kind of example, how you can put condition. Okay. Now, if you have noticed, we had that SID element, and SID ID also it could be stated as. So the SID is an optional identifier that you provide for the policy statement. You can assign a SID value to each element in a statement array. In services that let you specify an ID element such as SQN and SNS, the SID value is just a sub ID of the policy documents ID. So in IAM, the SID value must be unique within a JSON policy. Okay, if you see here, just an example. The SID element supports uppercase letters, lowercase letters, and numbers. In IAM, the SID is not exposed in the IAM API. You can't retrieve a particular statement based on this ID. No, I think I have gone in bit in detail, and if some of you don't understand, it's all okay at this moment of time, because the more we learn in this series, the more everything will start making sense. So if something is not understood at this point of view, don't worry, everything is going to be fine, provided you continue this series and finish it and comprehend all the concepts and all the tasks that I'm going to show you until end of the series. Now, use least privilege model. Remember this. And what does this mean is give user only minimum permissions to perform their project tasks. This is one of the best practices when you are in a role of AWS administrators or administrator role anywhere. This rule is for every administrator. And exercise cautious before modifying any policy. Think and evaluate its implications. These are best practices. There are many more, but if you keep strict to these two policies, you will become a successful administrator. Now here is a diagram. It's basically showing what IAM, what is the role of IAM or AWS IAM. If you see, it checks who is requesting. Okay, it can be user, it can be group, it can come from roles, it can come from anyone. Okay, and then if it is, for example, a user, and then it sees permissions, and that is what is requested by the identity. Okay, what is requested by anyone. Okay, and then it checks the policies and in the policy statements, and then it allows or denies. So if that is the role of AWS IAM, okay, to see who is requesting and what is requested by the identity, and check it against policy, and that policy checks against the statements. Here you can see that IAM, within IAM you have IAM user and IAM group, broadly speaking, and then you can use IAM with one of the following. You can use IAM through AWS CLI. These are Amazon Web Services authentications, can happen through AWS CLI, AWS SDKs, or Amazon AWS Management Console. Okay, just remember, we will start with AWS Management Console and slowly then move, maybe take CLI, and then later on we can see AWS SDKs as well, if that is going to make you happy. Now regarding policies, if you see IAM policies, what are these? We have groups within the IAM, and those groups could be attached. Those groups are attached with policies, and I will show you. One policy can have full access to, for example, Amazon S3 bucket 1, and the other policy could give read-only access to bucket 2 of Amazon. Okay, and these are policies, and they can be attached to the groups. And we'll see. We will create groups. We'll create users. We'll put them in groups, and we'll attach policies, and then we'll use those groups and those users to perform our data scientist machine learning tasks. Now, if you see this is a sample policy, okay, if you see now that should start making sense to you. IAM policies are JSON document used to describe permission within AWS, and if you see there is a SID and effect is LO action is now you can see S3 delete object, okay, and these are basically showing you everything. And if you see condition is that IP address should be matched, okay, and then resources, and it's talking about S3 buckets, okay. Now this is just a sample policy. If you don't understand at this point of time, don't worry, and we'll talk about these policies in more detail as the lectures will progress. Now in this case, an application uses IAM role to pass temporary security credentials as a part of an instance profile. The application will use the identity assumed by an instance to access Amazon S3 bucket. Okay, if you see here is an application Amazon EC2 instance, and if you see it assumes the role, and then the role has some policies attached, and then it can access Amazon S3 bucket. This is one of the use case scenario, okay. Now in this case, IAM user do possess IAM restricted policy of Amazon S3 bucket. This IAM user does not normally need administrative privileges to this S3 bucket. However, due to business needs, user may sometimes need to perform tasks that require administrative privileges, and for this purpose a new admin policy is created, and then a new role is created and admin policy is attached to the role. When required, the IAM user could be allowed to assume IAM admin role and gain administrative access to the designated resource. When the IAM user no longer needs to use the role, the original IAM user permissions are restored, and this eliminates the need to modify IAM user policy each time the change is required. Hope this is really simple. I have put it in a text so that you understand. Once we will be using all that, you will then understand when the practical tasks are going to come with the lectures which I'm going to give you, when creating users groups, and then you will understand this bit in then you will comprehend these concepts well. Now if you see here is this if you see IAM restricted policy is here assigned, okay. If you see, so here's an IAM restricted policy. It's assigned to the IAM user generally, and normally restricted access. This user has normally restricted access to this Amazon S3 bucket. But if this IAM user needs access to this bucket, what is done, an IAM admin role is created, and then the new policy is attached to this role, and then this role could be given to this new user, and what happens then using this role he can get the access to Amazon S3 bucket. Okay, this is a use of how you can use IAM roles and to perform certain tasks which are not normally performed by a user. Now important points to remember is IAM enables you securely control individual and group access to your AWS resources. Using IAM, you create and manage AWS users, groups, and user permissions for your AWS services. IAM provides fine-grained control options and support federated users or users outside AWS, like integrating with your company's Microsoft Active Directory or third-party identity providers such as Google or Facebook, and having authenticated users assume IAM roles. Now, this could be different, but generally what happens, maybe, step number one is to create an IAM group, and then step number two is to create an IAM policy and assign it to IAM group, or attach, you can create or you can attach the default policies, built-in policies from policy section and attach it to the group, and then you can create user, or you can create a user, create a group, and then attach a policy to them. These steps can be, I have just shown step one, step two, step three, but these are three important steps. Whenever you are, creating a group or a user, you create for example, a user, you put it, you create a group for it, and you attach a policy to it if it's from the first time. But if the group is already created and it's already assigned with a policy, then you can just create a user and add to it existing group, or as I said, you can create a new group. So these steps could come at once. Maybe at times it might start with a user and then put it in a group and then create a policy, or you may start with a group and then create a user, start with a group, attach a policy, and then add a user, existing or a new user, to it. Now, we strongly recommend that you do not use the root user for your everyday tasks, even when even the administrative ones. Instead, adhere to the best practice of using the root user only to create your first IAM user, and that most probably is going to be administrator user. Okay, and then securely lock away the root user credentials and use them to perform only a few account and service management tasks. That's the best practice. Everyone does it, so I recommend you to do the same. Now, here's the time, the test time, or test your progress time, and I request to pen down everything you learned from this and previous lectures about AWS services, especially about AWS Identity and Access Management, that is IAM. If you start writing down what you learned from this lecture, and if you are able to pen down everything, write down everything, that's great. It means that you have comprehend the concepts given in this lecture. But if you find difficulties, that means that you need to revisit this lecture maybe once, twice, or thrice before you comprehend all this, because it's a very important topic to understand what's IAM and how it could be used. Although I'm going to show you how users are created, how groups are created, how policies are attached, inbuilt policies are attached, or create new policies are created when we amend policies. We are going to do many tasks here within AWS account. So don't worry if everything is not if you are not understanding everything, that's okay, but we need to comprehend each concept given at some point in this lecture series. Okay, at some point. Okay, now next topic, what I'm planning, next topic of this lecture series is going to be about AWS Identity and Access Management, and we are going to talk about IAM features. Okay, now before I wrap up this lecture, I would like to ask a question, and that's, how do you rate this lecture and the presentation on the scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is best? And please rate it and give your feedback, because that helps us to make better and better lectures for all of you guys. Now that brings me to the end of the lecture, and now that is it from me, and I hope that you like the lecture. And if you do, then I suggest to watch this lecture until end, because there are some more slides coming in, and that there is some more information about how you can remain connected with us and gain maximum from data analytics professionals. I see you in the next lecture, and you stay safe.